When I was a novice, the beginning of your life as a Jesuit or a religious life, you go off to a novitiate as a novice. I was very young, and at the time there had been this is the early 90s, a movement, I suppose you'd say, that was at least 20 or 30 years old, of a kind of Zen Christianity. If it interests you, there's a very nice little book called Silent Music by an Irish Jesuit who lived in Japan for decades and was very taken by Zen meditation practices. And so people like he tried to take the best from these practices and marry it, if you like, to Christianity. As usual, some went off the deep end. But for many people, many Christians, particularly in the West, where we're so obsessed with abstraction and words, Zen felt like a calming balm to just live in the silence. Now, we have our own tradition of that's 2,000 years old, of monastic spirituality, but nonetheless, there's usually some sort of, shock value of when we encounter things in foreign cultures. And wisdom, and there's the work of the Spirit going on there. To the extent we had a fellow visit us, he was an Indian Jesuit who'd been in Japan forever, and he was a Zen Roshi master. And he came to teach us how to use Zen techniques for prayer. And being a very, very conscientious novice, I thought, well, okay, if this is what we're told to do, let's do it. And that was all very helpful, trying to understand, recover really, for we Western Christians, the power of silence and meditation, and hopefully rediscover it in our own tradition, not to go with a begging bowl to, romanticizing the mystical East, which is a very kind of Western thing to do, right? Anyway, I say that because at the heart of the Zen practice are koans. And koans are paradoxes. And in a way, there's always the sort of the half funny one of what's the sound of one hand clapping? Or if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? The point of koans in that tradition, and paradox generally in literature or philosophy and other religions, and our own religion, hence getting to my point, the paradoxes today of the Beatitudes, is that they really do bend our minds and hearts into a different way of trying to see the world. You remember studying English at school, a paradox is different from a contradiction. It's an apparent contradiction. It's not a contradiction, but looks and feels like one. That God becomes man. Sounds utterly contradictory. It certainly was for the ancients around the time of Jesus. It certainly was for the Jews. Impossible. Laughable, as Paul discovers. Laughable to the Greeks and Romans, sacrilege to the Jews. In any case, that's the paradox at the heart of our Christian faith. It's not a contradiction, but it's a paradox. Today we have that God-man, Jesus the Christ, probably disappointing many in this central part of the Sermon on the Mount, which has to be the most influential speech ever given. Can I say that? In the history of the West, at least. And he says crazy things. In the midst of Roman occupation, he doesn't say, we're going to sort this out, like Barabbas, the Zealots. Don't worry, I've got a plan. We're going to go in there, we're going to sort it all out. He says mad, paradoxical things, particularly at the beginning. How is it that those who mourn will be comforted? How is it that those who are meek will inherit the earth? How is it those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled? All these things sound lovely, but are they just sort of a distant idea? We sort of struggle through the fallenness and sinfulness of the world, the injustice, and then we get to heaven and things are okay? Well, yeah, for some people that is it. Life is grueling. We're pretty blessed in this country, but even in our own backyard, there are people who've never had a break. Life is hard. But we'd misunderstand the meaning of this if we thought it was all off in the future. The paradox that Jesus is proclaiming again and again in the Gospels, and he does it here, is that the kingdom is not here yet, true, and yet it's already here. It's a paradox, the heart of our faith. Still true today. When we see and experience real love, when we see compassion for the poor, indignant, righteous anger with action, when we see injustice, whatever someone's faith, whenever we see that, we're seeing the kingdom alive in front of us. When we experience mercy, a renewal, or coming up for Lent, that my sin doesn't define me, the wound doesn't consume me. I can be free in Jesus Christ with his power. All of that promise, when it occurs, is the kingdom being already here. And we live in that in-betweenness as disciples of this humble Nazarene. The Greek word makarios for these blessings is not the same as happiness. It sometimes gets translated as that. Happiness, especially in our culture, can be that fleeting sugar hit, or the thing we strive for that so often doesn't make us happy. And we fall for it all the time. Owning things, having control will make me happy. But at the end of the day, we know that faith teaches us the only thing that makes us happy is serving the Lord and receiving his love, handing that love back, but in service of others. And so in the paradox of our faith, it's only by giving ourselves away, letting go of power, letting go of what the world thinks of us, the status, the riches, whatever it might be, letting go of their hold on us, that we experience true freedom. These are contradictions in the eyes of the world, but for Jesus Christ, this is the essence of life. So here we are 2,000 years later, remembering this speech on the mountain where the poor, the meek, the humble are going to be exalted. And they are already exalted, because the other point of this is the blessing is there already in this life if you live this way. If you live this style of life, this way of being and interacting, the promise is you will receive the blessings, the already of the kingdom, in the midst of the not yet. But so fundamentally, it will involve suffering. But for the early Christians, they discovered the suffering, the terrible persecution that Christ experienced, that they experienced, and that many Christians around the world still experience, brings a freedom when it's done in love of him. Another paradox. How can suffering bring freedom? Only by God's grace. But that's what we believe is possible. So this is like a koan, if you like. We don't have to go digging around other religions. We've got it right here. Paradox at the heart of our faith. The things the world says should be rejected, belittled, dismissed, are lifted up by Jesus Christ. And the way to live is to live in the paradox of following him in a world that still sees him as a fool.